Good evening. I'm Cindy Powell. On behalf of the Orinda Association, I'd like to welcome you to tonight's program. The evening will be divided in two segments. The first segment will be the Orinda City Council Candidates Forum, moderated by the League of Women Voters of Diablo Valley. The second segment will be Firewise presentation from MOFD board member Craig Jorgens. Now I'd like to introduce the moderator for the first segment, League of Women Voters of Diablo Valley board member Ann Flynn.
Thank you very much, Cindy. And good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's event. As Cindy said, I am Ann Flynn from the League of Women Voters of Diablo Valley. I don't live in Orinda, nor do I vote here. Thank you for joining us. This forum is to present candidates running for the Orinda City Council. There are 3 candidates running for 2 seats. The candidates are Darlene G., Latika Malkani, and Inga Miller. The League is a nonprofit and nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose any candidate. We are here this evening as part of our key mission to educate and inform voters. This forum is being recorded and will be shown later on CCTV, the Orinda Association website, the Orinda City website, and on the League's YouTube channel. Before the program began, the name of each candidate was selected at random to determine opening speaking order. Closing statements will be in the reverse order. Each candidate will give 1.5-minute opening remarks, and at the end, a 1.5-minute closing statement. During the question and answer portion, I will alternate candidates I call on first to avoid giving any candidate an advantage or a disadvantage. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. If they wish, each candidate will have the opportunity for 2 rebuttals of 1 minute each upon their request. We have 2 League of Women Voters timekeepers visible to the candidates. As a speaker reaches the end of their allotted time, the speaker will see a yellow card with 15-second warning, and when time is up, you'll see a red card. So each candidate will now have 1.5 minutes for her opening statement, beginning with Inga Miller.
Okay. My name is Inga Miller, and thank you for being here this evening. It has been my great honor to represent our community these last 4 years through the good times and the challenging times, like now, when we are limited to our ability to meet face to face and have to make the best of these new and sometimes disorienting manners of communication. During the last 4 years, we have shown that we are a caring community. We are a community that works together, and we are a community that rises to the occasion when called. During these last 4 years, we have begun work to revitalize our downtown in a way that considers the needs of our Orinda residents and works to address concerns with thoughtful solutions to assure that the downtown we build is locally serving with more options for our residents and respects our magnificent natural surroundings. We, in these last 4 years, have renewed our commitment to our library, passing a parcel tax to care for its maintenance and additional hours. We welcomed our new Wilder residents, working to assure Wilder is a connected part of Orinda. And we also have made headway on our road and drain system and started the long and ongoing work to prepare for wildfire in our community. I am here today to ask for your vote to allow me to continue to work on your behalf with the positive attitude and collaborative approach I've brought to the last 4 years on the City Council. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Latika Malkani.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters of Diablo Valley, to Orinda Association for hosting tonight's event, and thank you to all of you watching for taking the time with all else that 2020 has brought us to inform yourself on local issues. I'm Latika Malkani. I'm an attorney, a small business owner, and a mom, and I'm running to make our city better. I've lived in Orinda for 16 years, raised my 3 kids here, with one still at Miramani, and over the years, I've enjoyed volunteering alongside many of you, doing what we all do to keep the Orinda magic going, especially for our kids. I'm committed to finding creative solutions that will keep us safe, protect our future, and improve our quality of life. My priorities include wildfire prevention and emergency preparedness, and that is my first and foremost priority, as well as continuing to fix our roads and drains and thoughtful downtown revitalization. Unlike other candidates, I am also prioritizing addressing climate change by creating clean energy choice as an alternative to PG&E, the same program already available to Moraga, Lafayette, Walnut Creek, and so many other cities. 2, expanding community engagement, including quarterly town halls with more citizen input and increased government transparency. And 3, fostering an inclusive, welcoming community. I have extensive experience in leadership and will bring a fresh perspective to Orinda. I'm also an experienced leader and collaborator who gets things done. Orinda is a truly incredible, caring community, and I've so enjoyed living here, and I'd love to give back if you will allow me to do so.
Thank you very much. And our final speaker for the opening remarks is Darlene G.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the Orinda Association and the League of Women Voters for tonight. I've been privileged to serve on the City Council for the last 5 years, and for the 4 years before that on the Infrastructure Oversight Commission. During those 9 years, I've been a leader in our infrastructure rehabilitation throughout the community and a longtime proponent of revitalizing downtown. I'm pleased at the progress we've made on all of those topics and the direction we're going. I'm also proud of my year as the mayor. I led the formation of a new joint subcommittee this year between Orinda, Moraga, and MOFD to better coordinate efforts on wildfire prevention. This is the first time that our 3 agencies have been able to come together for open community dialogue. I've also worked very hard this year to address a lot of the challenges and issues of COVID-19, and we held multiple conversations on policing in Orinda, reviewing, answering questions, and ultimately taking steps to have our officers wear body cameras, as well as instituting quarterly police oversight reviews. I led an outreach effort with the Orinda Union School District to collaborate better on diversity and inclusion, and together we're making progress on multiple initiatives. I've lived in Orinda for 31 years with my husband, Dennis, raised our 2 sons, Brian and Eric, from Glorietta to Miramani. I enjoy working hard to keep Orinda a wonderful city with an ever brighter future, and I'm asking for your vote to remain on the City Council.
Thank you very much, candidates. Now, for the next 40 minutes or so, I'll ask questions. I'll do my best to ensure that each candidate has the opportunity to answer each question. Personal attacks are not permitted. Statements made about other candidates must be in the public record or they are not allowed. And our first question goes to Latika Malkani. So Latika, what are the issues today that made you want to run for office? What in your background uniquely qualifies you to serve?
Thank you. I ran for city council because while I think that our city is moving in a wonderful direction in many ways, I think we can do better. I have not served on council committees, but I do have extensive experience in leadership and will bring a fresh perspective to Orinda. I've been a practicing lawyer and litigator for 24 years, and I'm a small business owner managing my own law firm where I employ 9 people. I've served on 3 nonprofit boards, including 6 years serving on the board of Planned Parenthood Marmonte, which is the largest Planned Parenthood affiliate in the nation, which runs 32 health centers in 2 states and has a budget about 5 times that of Orinda. So I do have experience in management, budget, and strategic planning, and in making difficult decisions. For 8 years, I've been a leader within the California Lawyers Association, the preeminent statewide professional organization of lawyers, where I regularly work together with my opposing counsel to uphold professional standards and provide education.
Thank you, Latika. Next, we'll hear from Darlene G.
Well, as I mentioned, I've had the privilege of serving on the council for 5 years, And before that, I spent 4 years on the Infrastructure Oversight Commission, including chairing that very important group in the city. I'm a registered civil engineer. As my background, I'm a senior vice president of a major transportation consulting firm. I also have an MBA from UC Berkeley. I have committed an untold hours to Orinda in the last 9 years. I am incredibly familiar with all of our staff, our departments, our state representatives, our community members in La Orinda, and I have worked collaboratively with virtually everyone in Orinda over the last 9 years. I am confident that I bring both professional expertise, an open mind. I'm a good listener. I've been very responsive to our community, and I appreciate the opportunity to continue to work with the residents.
Thank you very much. And our final speaker, Inga Miller, what are the issues today that make you want to run again for office, and what uniquely qualifies you?
Thank you. Yes, we certainly have work ahead of us. Wildfire is on all of our minds, and we have more work to do on our downtown. So we have a lot of important work. This is a critical moment in our community. I certainly wanted to stay and be here for our residents during this very, very difficult time, and to be able to be back and hopefully in person sometime soon. But in the meantime, to all keep it together in this new kind of digital age. My tenure with the city has been long. I moved here in 1980 after my parents had a brief moment where we lived in Oakland for a few years, and that was an opportunity for me to see another community. But they grew up here in Orinda, and we moved back. And I've lived here most of my life. I wasn't very involved in city politics while I was a journalist. I was a local news reporter, and that allowed me to learn about answering questions. And that's something I've brought to our Parks Commission and to lobbying for our city as a council member in Sacramento, and of course the work on the council, and I like to continue.
Thank you very much. Now, Inga, you're going to be first up on this next question. These questions were submitted through the Orinda News, and there's quite a bit on taxation and budget. So we'll begin right off with Measure R. It will extend and increase the current sales tax by 0.5%. That will go into the general fund. Do you support Measure R, and how would you ensure the tax increase is actually spent on fire prevention and infrastructure?
Absolutely, that's a wonderful question. In Orinda, we pride ourselves on being fiscally conservative. And so we had a lot of discussion about whether we should ask to simply renew the 0.5-cent sales tax that we currently have that's been dedicated to road maintenance, or whether we should go and ask for a little bit more to have a little bit more flexibility to do a few more things around town. Now, as a general tax, that money would not legally be restricted to a certain use, but as the electorate, as we would be the elected council members making decisions on that, it's of course up to the community how to use that. And of course, wildfire is on the front of everybody's mind right now. And so it is really a community discussion how to use that money. There is so much need on our evacuation routes, on brush clearing, on emergency preparedness, figuring out how to learn to landscape in this new world. And so I see money's being used toward that. I'm hearing our community ask for that, at least in the beginning. And then of course, also using it for our roads.
Thank you. So next, Latika Malkani, this is about Measure R, and do you support it? And how would you ensure that the tax increase is actually spent on fire prevention and infrastructure?
There's a lot of imperfections with Measure R and a lot of opposition to it. I have, after some consideration, decided I am going to be voting for it. The reason why is because, though imperfect, we really do need the funds. I think Orinda needs the funds. The city budget currently contains very little for fire prevention and emergency preparedness. So while everyone says now this is their top priority, it hasn't. We haven't spent money on it. We haven't spent resources on it as a city. So with or without Measure R, I think we need to do a lot more. With Measure R, I would support reserving some funds for continued infrastructure because we do have to deal with especially our drains. But I would front load the bulk of additional revenue for the next 3 to 4 years for wildfire prevention and emergency preparedness. Without Measure R, I would still scour the city budget, advocating to pull what we can from various sources. Items that come to mind are rolling back or pausing recent salary scale increases, trimming some consulting work, and aggressively looking for external other sources.
You'll have more time to talk about the budget. So Darlene G, next, what do you think about Measure R? Did you support it? And how can you ensure that the money will actually be spent on what the ballot says it will be?
Yes, I indeed supported Measure R. In fact, I worked very hard for a full year on the subcommittee working to decide what we were going to recommend to the council to put on the ballot. So we looked at extensive opportunities and thoughts. We surveyed our community multiple times and ultimately collectively agreed to put Measure R forward. I absolutely am personally committed to ensuring that, especially in the first 5 years, that we use all of the money that we can toward fire prevention. I think that that's going to be incredibly important. In the first 5 years, I would even expect that the only other activity that the money would be used for would be our major drainage program. We also have some serious, in fact, we have 10 high priority drainage projects that we do not want another minor road. And then in the long term, this would fund both maintenance of all 3 of those categories, but absolutely committed to making sure that those are the 3 places where the monies go.
Thank you very much. And Darlene, you'll be up with this new question. You're up first. Even before the present fires began raging, 86% of Orindans surveyed named fire prevention as their top concern. Why didn't the city put such a dedicated tax on the ballot instead of Measure R, which is a general tax and can't be earmarked? Darlene?
There are multiple reasons why we approached it the way we did. First of all, the general sales tax only requires a simple majority +1 to pass. A specific parcel tax takes a 2/3 vote, which is extremely challenging to get. Yes, we have gotten 2/3 votes in the past, but it is very hard. Also, the sales tax, as we arranged Measure R, actually generates more money than we believed would be capable of being provided in a parcel tax that would pass. So we also, for many years, I think it's probably very legitimate to say that we did not put a lot of money as the city into fire prevention, but the city receives 7 cents of every property tax dollar in Orinda. MOFD receives 24 cents of every property tax dollar. I think for many years it was believed that MOFD really should be the full leader in fire prevention. I think we've come to recognize that it's really got to be a collaborative effort. They need to do their part. We need to do our part. A big reason for Measure R.
Thank you very much. Next, Inga Miller, same question. Why didn't the city put a dedicated tax on the ballot?
Absolutely. And the same, I have the same answer as the mayor in regard to the ease with which a general tax is passed. And we felt that there is well, I should back up. A general tax is different, however, than a parcel tax, because a parcel tax would be restricted only to a certain use. The general tax is also flexible, and that we can adjust to what our residents wish the monies to be used for in this case. So while we are hearing a great desire for monies to be spent at this point at fire brush clearing, getting up and running on education about what we need to be planting, and of course the evacuation routes. It may be that we find that we want to spend more of that money later on, for example, fixing our evacuation routes, our roads. And a general tax does give that flexibility. It allows the electorate to be coming to the city council and saying how we want to use that money, and does provide that flexibility. So that's another benefit of the general sales tax.
Thank you very much. And finally, Latika, would you have supported putting a dedicated tax on the ballot instead of Measure R? I
would not have put Measure R. I I would have preferred the Measure R didn't look exactly like it looks now. Again, I am voting for it because I think the city needs the funds and it's on the ballot. If it weren't 20 years, but 10 years, and if it had not morphed the way it did, I think there would be less resistance, and it's unfortunate we have resistance to it in that sense because we really do need some funds. But I understand where that resistance is coming from. If it doesn't pass, I do think we have no choice but to look at a parcel tax earmarked for fire prevention and for infrastructure. I agree that we don't want to see our city burn, but we also cannot afford another sinkhole, and we do need to reserve some funds for drains. And so there's no question that there has to be a dual use, but fire mitigation and emergency preparedness as well needs to be our top priority.
Thank you very much. Latika, you'll be first up on this next question. There's another sales tax measure on the ballot, Measure X, a similar 0.5% tax for the entire county. Do you support Measure X? And how would you want to allocate those new funds if Measure X passes and you get to see any of that new money?
I think for county-wide, there are bigger concerns about a sales tax that make it harder to support. And those are that while Orinda has exemptions for the sales tax for certain items, we are a relatively wealthier community. And if we look at the county-wide, that sales tax has a disproportionate impact on a lot of people. So I am less enthusiastic about Measure X and concerned about the impact it's going to have on low-income people and those that, especially during COVID times, are living paycheck to paycheck in our county.
Thank you very much. Next, Darlene G. Do you support Measure X that's also on the ballot?
I understand why the county moved forward with Measure X. I would tend to agree that I have some reservations at the county-wide level because, again, looking at the residents and the socioeconomic makeup of Orinda is quite a bit different than the county at large. I know that the county feels very strongly about trying to maintain the hospital system, and that's one of the big drivers for why they've moved forward with it. I guess I would say that I support it with some reservations, and the reservations are similar to what you just heard, that sales taxes do tend to be very regressive. They tend to impact lower income people harder, and so I think it's a little challenging in today's environment, more so than in Orinda, but I would say overall I do support what the county is trying to accomplish.
Thank you very much. And Inga Miller, do you support Measure X?
Again, this is a difficult question. This is a difficult one. And in the time of COVID, the county did feel that it needed that sales tax in order to support the county hospital. And so for that reason, I do support it, although I do share the concern that we do not, we want to be careful, and we're fiscally very conservative in Orinda, and we like to see that same fiscal conservatism in the rest of the parts of the county and where we're paying taxes. But given the COVID crisis, I do believe that there was a need to continue to support the county hospital at this time.
Thank you. And you're up first for this next question. The present sales tax expires in 2022. Why not wait and put a new sales tax on the ballot in 2022 when the pandemic and the recession have been better resolved? Inga Miller?
Right. Well, that's a fair question. And these types of questions are very difficult. And we will, in the event that Measure R doesn't pass, we will in fact have to look at whether we as a city council want to go and put it on the ballot again to see if voters want to approve it in a somewhat different form, maybe as a different amount or with a different sunset. And so this gives us a little bit of flexibility to try it one session earlier versus the last possible election at which we could try it. Because if we don't pass it then, we will then have a deficit that we won't be able to fill with the monies that are now being produced through that half-cent sales tax that are going to repave our roads, and that we so desperately need to keep those newly rehabilitated roads in good condition.
Thank you very much. Latika Malkani, would you have recommended waiting until 2022 to extend the current tax?
So it's interesting because I think that was the city's original plan, I think, was to extend the sales tax. I think it's true that waiting until the last second to do that creates risk if it doesn't pass, although for a sales tax, it just requires a majority. So I think it probably would have passed. If a sales tax were to be put on the ballot as it is now this year, I would have preferred that it be for a shorter time period because I think it would have gotten less resistance if it weren't 20 years, if it were shorter. Again, I am voting for it, but that's what I would have done.
Thank you very much. Okay, and Latika, I'm sorry, Darlene G, please, your question. Why didn't you wait to put the tax on the 2022 ballot?
The extension of the sales tax had to be a November general election timeframe. It cannot be put on a primary ballot or a special ballot. So we only had two opportunities, this November and November of 2022. And as has been mentioned, there's risk waiting until the last minute, which is why we had always considered looking at this November as the extension of it. Over time, increasing it and changing the time frame really came into focus more as we looked at how much we were trying to cover the fire prevention, the major drainage, and the long-term road rehabilitation and maintenance. So when we really looked at that whole picture, that was what drove the 20 years versus the 10 years. And that's where we also increased to 1 cent instead of a half. And we might also remind everyone that Moraga already has 1 cent, as do many other surrounding communities in Contra Costa. So we felt that, again, we were being prudent and responsible.
Thank you very much. And Darlene G, you're up for this next question. Measure R, if passed, will be the largest general tax increase in Orinda history. Measure R supporters assure us the money will go to fire prevention, maintenance of roads, and storm drainage repairs. They assert infrastructure maintenance is also a critical safety need. Yet almost 30 miles of publicly accessed private roads and storm drains will continue to receive no funding or city attention. Many tax-paying residents on these streets want the city to accept these roads into the public system for their maintenance and safety. With this new source of funding, will you support reconsidering this important issue?
Well, I have been a longtime proponent of trying to find a solution to our private roads and drains problem. As a civil engineer, I completely understand the benefits of a unified system, and I continue to believe that the city wastes a great deal of resources in many ways over the system that we have. However, ultimately, to address the private roads issue will require the whole community agreeing to that. Ultimately, I want the community to be able to vote on that. I was the lone vote against our current measure, our resolution 5918, which basically makes it almost impossible for private roads to be made public. I don't agree with it. I have been willing to spend the money to evaluate the private roads, and I have been a long time proponent of, while I recognize there's got to be more money in the system, I would like to get to a point where the community can actually vote on that.
Thank you very much. Inga Miller?
Thank you. This is another very, very difficult question. It's a very complicated question. It's something that is a bit unusual to Orinda itself. And the magnitude of the question of accepting all of the private roads into Orinda by any estimation would require tremendous public investment, a very, very large number. And for that reason, I am not supportive of an all-out inclusive vote to simply adopt all private roads into the system. It could be something in the many hundreds of millions of dollars of cost. What I've suggested instead is look at a road by road approach. Let's take some roads that may have a public benefit. In order to bring the roads into the public system, we have to make by law a factual finding of a public benefit. And so in order to do that for all roads, we would have to make that as to every single road. It's an extraordinary task. And so I've suggested there's some roads with a real public benefit. And I've suggested that we take a look at those roads and the policy that our mayor just mentioned, and that maybe we bring that policy back for a second look and see how we may address this one step at a time.
Okay, thank you very much. And Latika Malkani? I know that you weren't on the city council when this was addressed in the past.
It's okay, I have something to say about it. You know, I've observed so many arbitrary distinctions between which roads are private versus public, and I'm very sympathetic to the resulting inequities. I've also, on the campaign trail, heard from a lot of public road residents who don't support city funds being used to repair private roads. Frankly, it's a hot mess, but one that we can't continue to ignore anymore. So first, I do support including private roads in the next city roads survey, which involves minimal costs so that we can get a realistic assessment of repair and maintenance costs. So that discussion about what to do next is based on shared facts, not speculation about how many hundreds of millions of dollars this is going to cost. Second, I also support revising Resolution 5918, which in 2018 made it very difficult for even well-maintained private roads to seek conversion to public roads. And it's true that that Mayor G voted against that burdensome revision while Councilwoman Miller voted for it. Any additional fix would need to examine several factors, including revenue creation, cost sharing, conversion of roads from private to public, especially where there is a public benefit or where there's historical records that reflect an overlooked conversion. We also need to solicit extensive community feedback before committing substantial additional city funds. But we cannot ignore this anymore.
Thank you very much. And you're up for this next question. And you were not on the city council, I understand that. Why didn't Orinda spend any of its reserve or the approximately $100,000 a month it continues to receive in sales tax proceeds to continue or even expand the chipper program in Orinda when MOFD suspended it? How can voters be assured that the city will spend some of these new dollars on fire safety when it has spent virtually nothing since the Oakland Hills firestorm? Latika, you want to take a stab at that one?
Sure. Again, I wasn't on the council then, so I can't tell you why none of the extensive reserves were spent on chipper programs. I do think fiscal responsibility and balancing budgets is very, very important. I've seen that, you know, in nonprofits I've served with, and when their budgets have dramatically changed due to political climates. However, properly maintaining vegetation and proactively maintaining city fire hazards on city property is so important. And the costs involved with continuing that chipper program would have been really minimal. And it's unfortunate it didn't happen. I have publicly stated several times that I am committed to making sure that chipper program continues next summer. You know, if MOFD doesn't continue it, then the city needs to find the resources to do so. In addition to that, part of what I'd like to do with the budget is to see how our tax dollars are spent, be shared widely. So well before the council adopts the budget, I'd like to see a separate, well-publicized town hall where staff and council members propose the budget, explain it, and really encourage public comment on it.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, Darlene G. Why didn't Orinda spend any of its reserve or the approximately $100,000 a month it receives in sales tax proceeds for the chipper program?
Okay, well, first of all, one of the topics that has come up tonight and one of the topics that's very pervasive in this election is trusting the city council, and are they going to do what they say they're going to do? Well, in 2012, we said we were going to spend every penny of that sales tax on residential and road rehabilitation, and that is what we've done. The chipper program has been an MOFD program. while I think in the future, if Measure R passes, we will have a deeper collaboration about how to make it happen. But quite frankly, MOFD, I believe, let go of their responsibilities to help with fire prevention and decided to step back. Now, they felt that they were doing that for a good reason, but they certainly had more funding available to do that than we did. In terms of our reserves are critical. If we had not had the reserves, we couldn't have survived the minor road sinkhole. So we absolutely have to preserve that operation. So again, we did what we said we were going to do.
Thank you very much. And Inga Miller?
Yes, very much. And this is an area where it's not easy to understand how the city is separate from the fire department. That's not similar in many cities. And we have an unusual situation where we are bifurcated. We are a totally separate legal entity than the fire district, which has its own board. And so that was an MOFD program. And again, and they were not able to man that. And we understood that even if we put the money up, there was an issue with staffing. And so we have to be very fiscally conservative in Orinda, given our very, very small amount of unrestricted funds. And it just wasn't something that we felt we could do, given that there was also an MOFD issue with staffing. And again, it is something that we could look at doing with Measure R funds, because those funds would create a new source of revenue. And if our residents are still feeling that push to use it for the chipper, then that would certainly be a good use. And we certainly heard that in at the meetings regarding that.
Thank you very much. And Inga, you're up next for this next question. You're up first. What will you do to bring more dense housing and retail establishments to Orinda? Without further development of housing and retail to grow our tax base, it falls on existing residents to shoulder the increasing needs of our community.
Well, terrific. Well, I think I'll bifurcate those issues, because certainly there is a regional need for housing. There's also a desire by our city residents to have a diversity of choice in housing. And we've certainly heard that people want to be living downtown. People want to downsize and be close to resources and have that retail community, those restaurants near them. And then that's separate from a tax base, which would be grows with retail and having those types of uses, because ultimately homes tend to cost a community money versus provide money. They provide money in the very quick front end, but then they cost money. So I keep those separate. We certainly want to have both in our downtown. We do want to have a vibrant downtown. And I'm one of the 2 members on the Downtown Precise Plan. And right now we're finishing up that plan. And I hope that everyone here will be part of those discussions and will continue to be so. It's a really great project that we're working on, and we'll have it done in 2021.
Thank you very much. Latika, what would you do to bring more dense housing and retail to help grow the tax base?
So I support the Downtown Precise Plan as well in terms of moving forward with it, but I think we all do. So I'm going to sort of focus on housing. Creating new housing in Orinda is no longer actually a choice, it's a requirement. And from a statewide environmental perspective, in the Bay Area, we have a great need for increased housing, especially near jobs and transit, and Orinda is going to be required to do our part. So I think the question is, how do we decide where to locate that housing? I favor Orinda primarily retaining a single-family home zoning and character, and I'm especially concerned about adding density in a manner that further stresses already overloaded evacuation routes. I'm not willing to adopt an absolute, because while we have those beautiful views of the hills, that means we're landlocked with little open space within the city's jurisdiction. So creating the amount of housing we're going to be required to create is going to be a huge challenge. So we have to be creative and thoughtful about our rezoning. Some of that housing may need to be encouraging ADUs, but a lot of it will undoubtedly be zoned near downtown and transit. And in doing so, we have to consider the existing aesthetic, traffic patterns, city services, and evacuation routes.
Thank you very much. Darlene G.
I think our absolute top opportunity for additional housing is going to be what comes out of our Downtown Precise Plan. So again, we all know that we're working on that. We've just retained an economic forecasting consultant to help with that. But we do have a huge challenge in providing housing and in meeting housing. I've maintained wanting local control versus state mandated control, but we are going to continue to have to look at that and where that goes. The state legislature will be working very hard again to change rules that may change our single family zoning. So I think we also have opportunities. We discussed the other night looking at the church properties for denser housing. And in the long term, I would also like to look at a complete revamp of the BART station property. I think that could be incredibly helpful to the overall downtown plan, as well as how to space out new housing. But it is going to be a very big challenge.
Okay, thank you very much. Darlene, don't go far away. What is your plan for ensuring equitable policing practices? Do you support divesting from Orinda Police and putting more money into other community-based programs which benefit residents?
No, I do not. We are not a big city. We do not have the kinds of social services as a city that places like San Francisco and Oakland would. I do not believe in defunding our police. We have at any given moment 2 patrol officers, and most of our community very, very worried about safety. I think that the situation we have with the Sheriff's Department is excellent. It provides some incredible benefits to us. It causes us to be able to have speed and flexibility in our staffing. If there's a problem officer, we're able to send them back tomorrow. Whereas if it was our own police department, we might be faced with all kinds of problems. So we have a lot of resources. We have the county's mental health resources by using the sheriff. I absolutely am committed to maintaining our public safety and our police force. Our chief and our officers are excellent, and I don't want to see funds taken away from them.
Thank you very much. Inga Miller?
Yes, if I understand correctly, the question is, should we change funding of the police? Was that the question?
I'll read you it again. What is your plan for ensuring equitable policing practices? Do you support divesting from the Orinda Police and putting more money into other community-based programs which benefit residents?
I see. Okay. You know, we in Orinda have a very, very small police budget. We only, as we discussed after the terrible shooting tragedy that occurred just over a year ago now, or just under a year ago now, I should say, we only have 2 police officers on at any, 2 patrolling at any one time. It's a very, very minimal number of police. So that's really not a good option in Orinda. It's something that is more applicable to very, very large cities where they have many, many police and less other programs. In Orinda, what I can say is we are having many community meetings, and we've just created a committee to talk about fairness and to make sure that there's a forum for discussion about anything that anyone sees and believes is an unfair police practice or anything of that nature. And so that will be a forum where we can have discussions and make sure that we're putting resources into the right places and to talk with our wonderful chief cook.
Thank you very much. Latika, what would be your plan for ensuring equitable policing practices? And do you support divesting from the Orinda Police and putting more money into other community-based programs?
No one in Orinda wants to defund the police, but we do need to make changes. What I've proposed and what I think we need to do is, while the City Council did recently create what they call a subcommittee, that subcommittee actually consists of 2 council members. I think we need a resident review oversight committee so we can work collaboratively together with the police chief, frankly, the police unions, residents who have expertise in behavioral health, as well as people of color in the community who have unfortunately had some horrible experiences about racial profiling and targeting. There's a couple specific problems that have arisen. One is relating to traffic stops, and the second is relating to those who are observing traffic stops being subject to retaliation. And I think we need to just deal with that straight up in a collaborative, but very real way with a real oversight committee.
Thank you very much. Now you're up for this next question. Do you support Proposition 15? If it passes, how would you prioritize spending these new dollars?
I do support it because I think California needs it. And to the extent that we benefit and our schools benefit from that, that would be wonderful. And, you know, my understanding is that the tax will be on a percentage of the entities that can frankly afford it. So I do support it. You know, I'm not actually clear how much of it would benefit Orinda, and that's one thing I've been trying to figure out, frankly, and reached out to some of our school board folks to try to figure out exactly how much funds Orinda would get. But I do think overall our schools, you know, need more resources. So for the sake of the population that will be benefit statewide, I'm supporting it and voting for it.
Thank you very much. Darlene G., do you support Proposition 15?
I do support Proposition 15 because I think, again, it's kind of long overdue, and a lot of the reason that we have so many other taxes in California is because of the long-term inequities in Prop 13. However, in Orinda, 94% of our property tax comes from residential. So that's not going to change in any way, shape, or form. And also the exemptions on Prop 15 for very small businesses, which obviously, again, in Orinda, we have a lot of small businesses, is not going to generate very much money. I honestly don't believe that it's going to directly impact Orinda very much. But what we would receive, certainly the schools, fire prevention, and, you know, our infrastructure needs are all places where we need tax dollars.
Thank you very much. And Inga Miller?
This is a tough one, and I do have a mixed feeling on this one. One is, it has to do with the school funding. We're a little concerned that we're not going to see that school funding come back to Orinda, and that it could affect other funding sources for the schools. The other part of it is just the magnitude of the tax increase, which will ultimately, there's some discussion, be passed back to the renters, to the commercial renters, as well as to the consumers. And during this time of COVID, that is a very, very difficult proposition. And so at this point, I do have very, very mixed feelings on it. I know that in this time of Prop 13, we're trying to make adjustments and make it fair. And I know that this is an attempt to create a split roll to make a more fair system. And so I applaud it for that, but I don't know that it's quite the right fix.
Thank you very much. Now, unfortunately, this is time for our final question. We've done very well. We have more questions, but I'm afraid our program has to end. So Inga Miller, you'll answer this first. What does it mean to you to have a commitment to diversity, inclusivity, and how would you incorporate them into city hiring, employee practices, and police training?
That's a big question. You know, Orinda has always been a place where I've felt safe, and I'm certainly saddened by the stories I've recently heard from neighbors who have experienced racism and feel unwelcome in Orinda, and courageous neighbors who have come forward to share their experiences and have kind of provided us an opportunity to have this forum and to have this discussion. And I really think that those are questions that will come up on our subcommittee of the City Council that we discussed as having been formed. They're not things that I have a direct answer to right now, but I can say that certainly we want to have diversity. Diversity is very, very important, and it's important on many different levels for everyone to feel welcome, as well as for opportunities in our community. And so I very much support that. And I see my time is coming to an end on that. So I'm not sure if I'll get further into that one. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Latika, what does it mean to you to have a commitment to diversity and inclusivity? And how would you incorporate them into city hiring, employee practices, and police training?
When all residents feel equally respected, accepted, and valued, we have a more cohesive and happier community. And so it is very, very important to have greater inclusion and equity. I spend my days litigating employment cases, so I'm very familiar. And in fact, 20 years ago, I did a stint working for the Commission on the Status of Women for 2 years. And my job for those 2 years was to train city governments, including the Department of Public Works and the Juvenile Probation Department at the city, on how to incorporate a gender and race equity lens into their employment practices and their delivery of services. So I have a lot of very specific ideas and actually have written large reports on exactly how to do that. In addition to that, though, I think there's a lot of innovative ways to foster an inclusive culture while also promoting other city values, and I'd like to see that happen here. One of the things that I suggested in November of 2019 at public comment to the City Council that they're just now taking up is participating in implicit bias training. But there's a lot more we can do.
Yeah.
I'd like a seat at the table to help make this happen.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And Darlene G., what does it mean to you to have a commitment to diversity and inclusivity? And how would you incorporate them into city hiring, employee practices, and police training?
Well, I think diversity and inclusion is certainly very important. We want everyone in Orinda to feel part of the community. It's part of what makes us so special. And I feel that personally, I do understand diversity and inclusion very well. I'm part of a biracial family. My husband is Chinese American. We have biracial children. I certainly have lived that. As a woman engineer, I was a pioneer in the field. I spent the first 20 years of my life in rooms with nothing but men. So I understand the issue very well. Fortunately, right now, our city staffing is actually more diverse than the community at large, if you really look at the statistics. And I do think there's opportunity for us to continue that. As mentioned, I've been really pleased at the collaboration with the school district. I think that's important. And we've also talked very clearly about additional training that our police officers are getting through the sheriff's department in terms of it. We're also talking about implicit bias training, which I just did professionally for our city employees and our city council as well. So I think there's a huge range of possibilities, but I do think it's important, and I do think it's something that needs to be part of the city.
Thank you very much. So now we've come to the closing statements part of the evening. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes for a closing statement, and we'll go in reverse order from the opening statements. So we will begin with Darlene G.
Well, Orinda is a wonderful community. I've spent the last 9 years and hours upon hours contributing energy and my professional expertise to the city, working to preserve what we all love about Orinda, as well as helping to move us forward. I remain energetic and enthusiastic about continuing to work hard on the City Council, to listen to our residents, to be responsive, to ensure that our tax dollars are well spent. I believe they are, and I want to keep it that way, to work with the community on understanding their highest priorities, and to find solutions that help maintain our quality of life and the environment that we enjoy. It's been an honor serving Orinda, particularly as mayor in this very difficult year. And I want to thank the incredible number of volunteers that serve Orinda every day and that support our city in so many ways. I look forward to the opportunities that we collectively have in the next 4 years, and I hope that my record has earned your vote to remain on the City Council. Thank you again tonight to the Orinda Association and the League of Women Voters for giving us this opportunity. Good night.
Thank you very much. Latika Malkani.
Thank you. As I mentioned, I have had extensive experience in leadership and have a lot of ideas and a real energy and passion to give back to this city that has treated my family and I so well for 16 years. I feel very connected to this community. I've spent hours, like many of us, volunteering, whether it was, from slicing strawberries from the school lunches all the way through, working with debate programs and many other programs. My professional experience working in leadership has given me the ability to do something that I haven't seen enough of, which is ask a lot of difficult questions and really scrutinize decisions. And I would like the seat at the table to be able to do that. Another thing I'd like to see is a lot of more collaboration. I am concerned that our biggest concern right now is wildfire mitigation, and that we need to work together to accomplish fuel reduction everywhere. And the city needs to make fire prevention and emergency preparedness, it is first priority. I'm a collaborator who gets things done, and that's what our city needs right now. I want to encourage, first of all, I want to thank everyone for participating in this democratic process. I'd be honored to have your vote and to serve you on the Orinda City Council. And first and foremost, vote. Everyone vote. There's 3 ways to vote. Return your ballots by mail, in person, or at the drop box at City Hall.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Inga Miller.
We have work ahead of us. Wildfires on our minds. That means more evacuation drills. It means removing the underbrush and bettering our evacuation routes and educating ourselves on how we landscape. And we have a downtown to care for. That means finishing our downtown precise plan and continuing to support our Orinda businesses, as so many have done such a good job of during these difficult months, and finding incremental ways we as a city with few means can support these businesses through initiatives like outdoor dining in our community plazas. We have work to do to make sure all Orindans know, as we've heard, that we are an inclusive community. And I have worked very hard during these last 4 years to be a voice for all Orindans and to go the extra mile to do this job, having office hours, providing my phone number and email to everyone, and going to Sacramento on my own dime to lobby for our city. And I ask that anyone here tonight, please reach out to me, email me, call me. This is how I know what is important in our community. And I hope that I have your vote. I ask for your vote so I can continue to work on your behalf for the next 4 years.
Thank you very much. So audience members, these are your 3 candidates for 2 seats on the Orinda City Council. Thank you for your participation in the democratic process. And thank you for putting your candidate information up on the League's Voters Edge website, which is where citizens can find information about candidates and measures. So I want to thank the candidates, the Orinda Association, the Contra Costa Television group as well for co-sponsoring tonight's forum. For further information about candidates, issues, and voting, go to votersedge.org and be sure to vote on November 3 or earlier. Now, Cindy, I'll turn it back to you for the rest of tonight's program.
Thank you, Ann. And thank you to the League of Women Voters of Diablo Valley for organizing the candidates forum tonight.